It's my privilege that we can continue our study in the book of Job. In our first hour, we tried to put a good foundation on how to study and understand the Bible. The same thing applied to the book of Job. And we just saw a short overview. And now we want to go into the theme of this book. And I read the first verse in chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil, so did not do evil. And then it is described he was a man that has had sons, 7 sons, and 3 daughters, and he has a lot of substances. And it is described that this man knew how to become that what he became because he sacrificed. And we find him here as a priest who does sacrifice for his own house. And in verse 5 it says when the days of their feasting, when his sons were feasting, were gone about, then Job sent and sanctified them. So he called them and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my son have sinned," and cursed God in their heart. Said, cursed is a very powerful word. So in German it's more like they have disconnected them from God. Yes, but the language, we must understand, disconnection from God is a curse. So in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. So this is who he is. He is a man of God. He's perfect. He has full fear of God. He knows how salvation works. And here he is described. And now from verse 6, we find another scene in this book. It says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them." Now, if we don't understand the big picture of it, we might get confused what we read from here on. But I explain it, and then everyone can study it from his own Bible. Here we find a scene that happens in front of God, in the throne chamber of God. Here, because God created a universe and gave each one in that universe responsibilities, they come all together from now and then to report what's going on their planet, on the place God have put them to do a job. And since Satan became the owner, so to say, or the responsible for the earth because he took it from Adam, because Adam surrendered to Satan, so Satan took his place. So he goes to these assemblies because he is the representative of the earth. And he goes to the assemblies, and we see he's there and goes there. And he comes, and also God asked him, said, "Okay," and the Lord said unto Satan, "Whence comest thou?" And Satan answered to the Lord and said, "From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." So that's his job. And the Lord said unto Satan, "Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, and one that feareth God, and escheweth evil?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing? For nothing. Hast not thou made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face." And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. What I know that gets people very angry when they read this last verse is that the Lord gave Job and all he had in the hand of Satan. And yes, if you don't understand what happens, you might get upset on God and say, what a God is that? Can I really trust this God? But remember, this happens in front of all the representatives of this universe. Does God not fear that they might hate him for what he's doing? So let us look to the whole picture. And when we see the picture, when we know what's going on, we might see that there is something very great that God does toward Job and the sons of men, or of the sons of God, those are there, the whole assembly, that God actually acts for them, not for him. And that is a beautiful work that God does to ensure them the light of the truth about himself. So let us look under the title, The Great Controversy, to the scenes, to the big picture that many of Christians don't know and don't understand. It is written in the Bible, but it's written in different places. And the superficial student, I would say the one that is not converted, that does not really want to understand, will never find and never understand it. But for all those who are studying, they will find, and they will find an answer that satisfies their mind and their spirit perfectly. So let's look to the beginning. The Bible says at the beginning God created heaven and the earth. And even before he created the earth, he created the universe. And we look here to God. God is the one that is, from him goes out his love and his word, and everything he creates through that. And God has created the whole universe. And I made this in this diagram so that we might understand that everything lives out of God. That red thing inside that connection is the power of God that sustains the whole worlds. Every power in an atom comes from God. Science does not know where comes the power from. Well, if they would know that God is behind it, they would know where the power out of the nucleus of the atom comes. God sustains everything through his own power, through the connection that is there. Now God made representatives of the world, and those are in direct connection to him, to represent, to serve to the yes, not only the atoms or the inanimate world and not living world, but God has also a living world that he puts humans or angels to serve. And so we find that God has a throne of God there. He has his angels, and I can just picture them here as in a scheme, as a diagram. These are the angels of God that are there in the courtroom of heaven, and they are responsible to go everywhere and help with the sustaining of this big universe. So this is how it is, how God created, and everything is in perfect harmony because everyone lives out of that love of God and is a free agent. Because the connection in the angels and in the humans that were given morality must be to God on the base of trust. It's It's a needed connection, but it's a trust connection. It's a connection out of a choice. Now, when God created us, He didn't give us the choice to connect to Him, because, yes, it's like man does not choose to be connect to his parents, but he must be there that he might live. So when God created us, He created us connected to Him. And no one ever doubted that connection until one day, Lucifer, the first of angels, got ideas in his spirit that the way he was made is described very beautifully in how he was made in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, and you find there that he was out made of precious. He was the first of creation of an angel. He was the first angels. He was the first created angel, and he was the most beautiful, the most, and he looked to himself and got the idea that comes from himself. And he went on to this with this idea, and then he became jealous, and he now thinks that there are certain things there that are unrighteous towards him because who he is. He becomes more and more with the idea that he must be equal with God, or he must be God. And now God explains him that this is a deception of his spirit and his heart, and gives him long time to think about it. And Lucifer gets to the point where he understands that what he thinketh is wrong, and he's convinced it is wrong. And when he is convinced it is wrong, he has the choice to say, oh well, then let's get rid of these thoughts and these ideas and turn around. And if he would have done that, we would never be in this misery that we find ourselves now. But he went against conviction. He saw that rationally he was wrong, but he chose. And this is irrational, because sin is irrational. It has no cause. If you choose to do wrong and you see it's wrong, then there is no cause for that, because there is nothing in the creation of God that was made to choose the wrong. Nothing. Because He made only the good. And when you're convinced it is wrong, you turn away from that and let it go. But that Lucifer chooses the wrong against rationality, against reason, proves that sin has no cause. Has no cause. There's no cause why he then disconnects from God. He then disconnects from God and says, I am God, and I will make a change. I will show that I have a better way for this universe than you have. And then, of course, since all created beings are just good, they cannot be evil, he tries to go to the other angels and pursue them and try to convince them that something is wrong in God, that something is wrong and is not trustworthy. There must be certain things that needs to be changed, and that's the law of how things work. A law that can never be changed because it's the expression of God. He says that is not good. The law of taking and giving is not right. We should be independent. He put under the name of freedom, he put it independence. He switched those things, because freedom and independence are two different things. And he emphasized freedom, but he was meaning independence. And independence means I am living out of myself. Liberty means I live out of God, but I live it because I want it like this. I'm happy with this. So he goes around to the angels and he tries to show them that he has a better way. And something must be wrong in God. And there must be a change to the better, of course. Never went he and said, let's do wrong. Because he knew no one would follow him. Because in all our intention, how to make God created us, we want the good. But if we think we can be better than God, then we have a problem. And so the devil thought, Lucifer, who became the devil or Satan, thought that he has a better alternative for the universe. And amazingly enough, his wisdom that was now used for the evil convinced a third number of the angels to follow him, to disconnect from God. So they became Satan and his angels. But what is this? What does this bring to the universe? What are the fall of the Lucifer as consequences for the universe? We sometimes don't think about this because we don't know the scene. But imagine, everyone that is independent of God or is cut off from God has cut off from the source of life. Because nothing can exist without God. Nothing can exist without power. We see this here on earth. When we die, the power is gone. We're disconnected. The power is gone when someone dies. So let's make it very plain. There is only power in God for life. And disconnected, Satan and his angels would die. But now, God keeps him alive. What would happen if they just would disappear? If they just would, now after so much time of controversy, and that is written in Revelation 12, after this time of controversy, the worlds know it. These individuals that want the good for the universe suddenly disappear, die. What would happen in heaven? The result of it would be fear and uncertainty. The rest of the angels, the rest of the creation would just stick with God because they don't want to lose their life. Because they don't want to lose their good. They would check themselves and they would be not free anymore. They would fear and be uncertain. And God had a universe, and the Bible says there is no fear in love. No, trust cannot be gained by fear, can it? Love cannot be gained by fear, can it? It cannot be gained by bribery, by buying someone. You cannot gain that. Trust in God can only be done by being convinced about the goodness and love of God. And God didn't want to put his whole universe, his beings that were connected to him, to be connected to him out of fear. Would have been, these are terrible consequences. Not for God, because he is independent of everything. But he is love. And he has nothing to fear. That's why he isolates them, but he lets them live. Because he has nothing to fear. He has even nothing to fear for the other inhabitants. If there is really an alternative way to exist and to be happy, let's look for it. You see, if you would come to God one day and say, Lord, I have something to make better in this universe that you know. God might say, okay, tell me. He would not be upset because he has nothing, no fear. So, and if there would be an idea, why would he not take it? But you understand, it's not possible. That a created being knows it better. But if it would come, he would say, okay, Lucifer, let's look to it. And he saw for a long time to it and said, Lucifer, let's look, where does it lead you? What do you think? Be plain, he's reasonable. God says often in this scripture, said, come and reason together. God is reasonable. And if we would just come and reason with him, we would find understanding. But we accuse like the one that accused. We have a sinful heart that accuses God rather that goes into reasoning with him. So God allows Satan and the angels to remain alive, and he gives them liberty. Yes, they are not anymore in the throne room of God. They lost their jobs of responsibility, but they are there and they can go and try to say bad things about God. And if someone would really want to believe them, let's join them to see if that is right or not. And in the midst of this situation, since God is not stopping to create, he creates the earth and man on the earth, among other planets that he created after the conflict in heaven. And so God creates the earth, and he puts on the earth man. And of course, when he puts him on the earth, he puts him connected to himself. But since the universe is already into the controversy if God is trustworthy or not, he says, well, you can prove your trust in me. You have here this whole garden. You can eat from every tree. But there is one tree I would forbid you to eat. If you eat from him, you will die. So you can enjoy life in trusting me. But if you think there might be an alternative to trusting me, then you can eat from this tree. God puts the tree there to make the way of Satan towards man, to make a barrier. Satan could have tempted Adam and Eve very easily with his cunning devices, because the spirit of a man has not that wisdom that has the spirit of Satan, that has the angels. So that's why God put a barrier there and says, Satan, you can tempt man if you want. If he wants to follow you, he's allowed. But the only way you can do it is over this, because this brings equality. This the man can overcome. If God would allow Satan to tempt man not according to his limits and his abilities, then that would be an unrighteous fight. So God says, Satan, you can. If you gain his trust, he's yours. But the only way to gain his trust is over the tree. God has no fear. God had no fear that Adam would sin. Why should he? If he is not trustworthy, then let us not trust in God. So God is open. And he creates not only man, as I understand the Bible, he creates 100 worlds. And from 100 worlds, only one falls into the temptation with the trees. So it's not something that is specific, I would say. And we find that man trusted the snake without any reason. But they do it. And so man falls apart from God. He's separated from the circle of God's love. And now he becomes the agent, the slave of Satan. And being a slave of Satan, he is now prisoner. He is not anymore the king of the earth. He is now the prisoner of the earth. And it would have remained so if God would have known a plan. You see, God could have also let Adam and Eve die on that day. But he had a plan of salvation that immediately after their fall entered into action so that he could preserve their lives for the sake of regaining their trust, for the sake of connecting again with him. But let us look first to the consequences that came in man. What happened? What changed in man so that he was now not the same Adam that God created. When God created Adam, he had full trust in God and was bound to him. But he had not a perfect trust in God, so God put him under the test of trust. And so he failed that trust. And now he failed that test and became distrustful to God. And so he was changed in his being. He became with eyes, with a glass in front of his eyes that tells him, I am God. So through fall, inside of the heart of man, that was light, Jesus says in Matthew 6:22-23. He says that what should be light in man became darkness. How big is the darkness? That evil eye came into existence. It's that glass that puts before the entrance of our eyesight, so we become blind. We don't see reality. We see things through the things, through the glass that we are gods, that I am God. And so everything we do wrong. That's selfish nature. It's a spiritual thing. We are disconnected and can never be connected again to God. Our only course is death. That's the consequences. There is a change in man. I hope we understand that. There is a change. Adam, after the fall, is not the same as the one before the fall. Adam before was connected and was a loving person. Adam after the fall is a selfish person, immediately imbued by the spirit of the devil, accusing God and his wife that he ate from the forbidden fruit. This is a change. It's a dramatic, a change that cannot be undone again. So we see that God has a plan of salvation, and we call that plan grace. And that grace must do a work in man, because in man something was changed. Man doesn't see now who he is, but how can God get it out of him? And the only way to enlighten the human mind is his law. And he uses also the trials and the difficulties of life and even disease, especially to show man that something in him is wrong, that something makes him to deceive himself. And deceiving himself, the law shows him, oh, I do something that is wrong. But he realizes, like Paul in Romans 7, that he is not able to get rid of this law of death symbolized in his glasses. And he knows there's only one way, and that's the cross. That's for Job, the sacrifice that he brought. The only thing is that something in me must die, and that is the glasses, selfish nature, the old man must be crucified, So the law helps me to see. Without the law, I would never see it. Paul says, when the law came, I died, because then he saw who he was. And under this circumstance, if you read the Bible, under this aspect that the law of God is the only means, together with trials and diseases, to enlighten us, because they are all the effects of breaking the law. The trials, the diseases are the effects of breaking the law, of the 10 Commandments, the law of life. And so man must first realize that, and grace must make that plain. And through grace, God gives His 10 Commandments law so that we can reason, and from reason see that we are prisoners of ourselves. And so we can go to the cross, to the means that God provided for us, that we could never provide for us, and become alive again, become people that trust God, and through trust are connected again to heaven and renewed. That's the work of restoration from sinner to sinlessness, from a distrustful man into a full and perfect trust in God. That's the work in us. But it is also a work outside of us that grace must do. And when man sinned, Adam sinned, he became the subject of Satan, and he had no power to resist Satan at all. So that's why God must intervene through His grace, and He sets a limit for Satan to attack man, and that limit is His grace. And I pictured it with this green circle around man, that Satan cannot penetrate whatever he does, because that circle is God and His angels that protect everyone here on earth. And He did that for man, showing that He will put enmity against Satan. So Satan cannot attack us from outside, but he also can, and he also loses his power when our inside is changed. So then we are not anymore his friends, we are his enemies. Not that we fight with him in a fight like we understand it, but we are not with the same way of thinking anymore like he made us to do it. And I will put enmity, Genesis 3:15, between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So God, in this simple Bible verse, explains the whole plan of salvation, that grace comes and covers man, but it makes also man possible to resist the deceptions, not only the violence, but the deception, the spiritual deception of Satan. So we have a spiritual war to battle, because God in His grace keeps us in safety to overcome Satan, so that he cannot touch us physically. Everyone that he wants to touch, he must ask permission. So this is what the work must be outside. Let us summarize what's the consequences of the fall of man and the consequences of grace. The first thing is Adam lost his direct access to God. He could not see God anymore because he fell from his position of king of the earth. His place was taken by Satan. And so Satan is the one that meets with the representatives of the other worlds, sons of God, at the assemblies in heaven. It's not Adam. Satan goes instead of Adam because he took his place. That's the consequence of the fall of man. And he goes there and he reports from what happens on the earth, because we see here in Job that God asks him and says, where have you been? And what have you seen on earth? And of course the devil says he has seen this and that. And so God makes him aware of Job. But he comes and he just accuses. And we see immediately he accuses Job. And we'll see his accusation. He accuses Job. Oh yes, of course, Job is faithful to you because you have bought him. You have bribed him. Everyone you bribe trusts you. So he comes there to accuse mankind. He comes and accuses in Zechariah 3, he accuses the high priest Joshua. Satan comes also to the throne of God because he wants more control and influence over mankind. He knows he cannot touch Job. He cannot touch anyone if God does not take that curtain away. Because God puts in his grace a limit. He shields us all from his violent way of being. If not, he would have destroyed us for sure, for long. That's a consequence of grace, that he has to ask permission to be violent to us. He must even ask permission to tempt us spiritually. This must be given him of God, because he cannot break through the shield of grace that surrounds man. Let us understand that. It's very important to understand. Grace of God shields us, and no one can penetrate it. If God would not permit the devil to attack Job's things that he has, his children and all his goods, never could the devil do anything. Thank God that there is a protection for that. And now we come to Job and see that he is in the land of Satan, but he has a covered of grace in it, and he develops well in it. He has a trust to God, and he has a heart that is perfectly connected to God in the midst of a sinful world. That's why God, in front of all the sons of the universe, he asked the devil, have you seen my how say that? My servant. You see, he's my servant, not yours. He's in your world, but he's my servant. And the devil, of course, gets angry about that. How can one in my kingdom be the servant of God when I have a better alternative for God? And still, most people listen to the alternative of the devil, and they don't see that what he leads man to is death and destruction. So now God knows that Job is the one that trusts him fully because of his goods, because of his health. None of them. None of them. Because of his friends, none of them. Job trusts God because he loves God. He is convicted God is the best for him. He is one with God in his heart. That's why Job is allowed by God to be tested in faith. It's another test than the test of Adam, of course. But God has no fear to put Job under the test because he knows him. God has no fear that Job or the whole sons of God will accuse him that he allows the devil to destroy Job's goods and his sons and daughters and the servants and his animals. God has no fear that they will curse him for that, because he wants to show them all that this is for the benefit of Job first. Job will be the hero of heaven. Job will never complain for the test. Yes, the test came unexpectedly. Yes, the test, we will see, has shaken that chainsaw that I pictured here last time. That was having the best teeth to interrupt his connection to God. He was put under the greatest storm that could be put, and he did not fail. That's what God wanted to show, and that benefited Job, and that benefited all the sons of heaven, and that benefited us here on earth to understand that God only allows things when they can be overcome and when they can be a blessing for us. He would not allow the devil to touch us if that touching would not be us, our first blessing. Isn't that comforting to know? That God only allows that certain difficulties should come in our lives when it benefits us. I see this in my life since my reconversion, difficulty after difficulty, but I thank God for each one because each one becomes and strengthens my faith in God. Because I know at the end there will come a final test. And Job's test is final because he was perfect. He has a final test. And if he goes through that final test of trust, his life with God is secure forever. He's never in a danger anymore. He's restored unto God. By force? By bribery? Can God buy you? Can we buy love? No. Just love awakens love. And the way God is, his love was so strong for Job that he could be shaken and driven on each side. No matter what happened, he stood steadfast. And this story we will see and will be continued. Amen.